Hi, Richard.
Hi, Fred. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. Today, I think we have a very exciting session because we are going to see from frameworks to evidence what is building a paper trail or a digital paper trail. So, because every compliance framework comes with its own language, their own definitions, disclosures, expectations. And most businesses have to deal with several at once, like ISO standards, ESG requirements, cybersecurity, governance codes, and each full of overlapping demands that rarely align. So it's like all. So what is the result of all these? Hundreds of pages, duplicated efforts, and endless spreadsheets trying to make sense of all. So in this session, I think that we'll explore how PaperTrail tackles that complexity head on, how it organizes all those frameworks into one coherent structure, and how it detects overlap automatically, and also how that structure becomes the foundation for any company digital paper trail. Wow, that was a long introduction, but I think it's good to set the environment where we're going to play.
Yeah, a
Uh,
little bit of how is the sausage made? How does the system kind of do what it does?
right.
Um, and people will notice as we go through the conversation that it would be very similar if they tried to imagine themselves going through a consulting engagement.
Yeah,
It's very much the same stages, the same steps, the same outcomes.
right.
But we'll get into more of that.
Yeah. So, for example, what exactly happens after onboarding? Because we mentioned in previous session that would be an onboarding session. So what happened after onboarding? How does the platform decide which framework apply? Because actually there's many of them.
Yeah, that basically the onboarding establishes your business profile, right?
Right.
After onboarding, just imagine the AI brain, right? It
Yeah.
knows all the frameworks, all of the disclosures, all of the metrics, all of the stakeholder groups, and the various language that's used for a lot of similar overlapping things. So the AI analyzes your business
Yeah.
profile, your business sector, your size, operational footprint, environmental exposure, and governance obligations,
Right.
etc. And it instantly matches your profile against all the relevant leading frameworks, such as ISO 27001, Cyber Essentials,
Yeah.
ISO 9001, GRI, TCFD, UK Governance Code,
Right.
etc. From there, it extracts the specific disclosures, metrics, and reporting clauses that
Yeah.
apply to your organization,
Yeah.
forming basically a foundation for everything that follows.
Right. So, um, when what does mean when you say that AI distills frameworks into pillars and themes? Because it's something that we mentioned
Yeah,
before. Actually, probably we haven't covered that properly.
yeah. Pillars and themes are uh, they're objects, right? You'll find that pillars and themes are pretty easy to understand,
Yeah.
especially if you look at ESRS or
Right.
a lot of ESG frameworks, right? Um, Pillars, like each framework describes similar expectations in different words, right?
Right.
And PaperTrail reads through those individual elements and organizes them into relevant pillars, which are broad categories, right?
Right.
Like environmental, social, governance, security,
Right.
quality, or
Yeah.
performance, right? And that's an editable list. You can add your own pillars in there,
Right.
right? And themes represent specific focus areas within each pillar,
Right.
right? It's kind of organized into a hierarchy, and that hierarchy becomes your single map of compliance, a
Right.
unified structure where um, basically every framework can align to it,
Right.
right?
Right. And how does structure remove duplication and simplify compliance?
Well, once the disclosures are aligned under
Yeah.
common pillars and themes, the AI instantly recognizes overlap, right?
Right.
It's able to understand language differences
Right.
in what is essentially the same outcome, right? So, for
All right.
example, three different frameworks might all ask for evidence of a specific type,
Yeah.
right? Instead of managing three separate obligations, you would have a single theme related to a single pillar that
Right.
addresses all three, right? PaperTrail links them to one shared theme, yeah?
Right.
And you address it once, and it satisfies all related frameworks,
Yeah.
cutting redundant effort by anywhere from 60 up to over 70%
Well,
duplication.
yeah. That's pretty a high figure of redundancy. So I can imagine if somebody's doing this in spreadsheet, there's going to go a lot of
Oh,
confusion. It's,
yeah, that's one of the sources of the confusion. Another
right.
one is the language that's being used to express,
Right.
the requirements,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And especially when you go cross teams, right?
Yeah.
Someone might assign, someone head of a department to one thing and another head of a different department to another, and at no time will they
Yeah.
understand that half of what they're each producing
Yeah.
is a duplication of the exact same stuff, right?
Right.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the best way to show this is with an example of duplication across frameworks. So because you
Oh,
mentioned
here's a
different
very
people
common one.
tackling different
Yeah.
things, yes. So probably an example would be a good help to understand
Okay.
how this is tackled.
Yeah. Here's an easy example.
Right.
Information security awareness and training,
Right.
right? Having
Yeah.
a policy on it and having everybody aware of the policy, that kind of stuff. So in ISO 27001, it requires organizations to ensure that staff are aware of information security policies and that they've been trained accordingly.
Right.
That's their
Right.
language, right?
Yeah.
Cyber Essentials includes a control that users must understand secure use practices and avoid unsafe behaviors such as password sharing.
Right.
Fundamentally the exact same thing, different language.
Right.
ESG, so like GRI 403, occupational health and safety
Yeah.
section, and other governance standards also expect periodic employee awareness programs covering digital conduct and data responsibility,
Right.
right? So different frameworks, same expectations. Train your people and keep a record of it, right?
Right.
Have a policy, make sure it's disseminated, make sure everybody understands it and agrees with it. So PaperTrail recognizes that all three disclosures are one common awareness theme
Right.
under the security pillar,
Yeah.
right? So you upload your single training log or certification record just the one time, and it satisfies all of those three framework elements automatically.
Right.
There's,
And
there's
I think a very good example because here practically you have three people doing different things in the organization. So the person is doing ISO might not be involved in IT at all. And the person doing reporting for ESG might not involve in IT or the ISO standards. So
Mhm.
it's like three different functions separate across the organization doing exactly the same thing. Yeah, perfect example. It's
Yeah, like you
very
would
good
you
example.
would typically assign the cyber essentials to your tech leadership,
Yeah,
your ISO 27001 to your operations leadership,
right, right.
and occupational health and safety would probably go to HR leadership.
Yeah,
And that's just one of many examples where
yeah,
they're going to be duplicating work
yeah,
to achieve the exact same outcome.
yeah,
So it's best, especially since the actual outcome is, around technology policy,
right.
you would assign that to your tech person, and the others would be able to see it when they look
Yeah,
at their relevant frameworks. So the guy who
right,
looks at ISO 27001 would see the disclosure and that it had already been satisfied and had been tasked out to somebody.
right. Excellent. So,
Yeah.
well, going back to the hierarchies, and what happens when that hierarchy is built? So, how do disclosures and evidence link back to those hierarchies?
Well, think of it like each pillar and theme
Right,
becomes a living node, right? It's a
right.
node in your compliance model, right?
Yeah,
Based on your business profile and the various frameworks, right? All the linked disclosures point back to that node. Yeah. And any supporting documents you upload, policies, certificates, reports, they can be attached once and automatically recognized wherever relevant. Right. So over time, the network builds up. It builds itself. Right. New frameworks, connect to the same structure by virtue of the pillars and themes, continuously strengthening the overall profile for compliance.
And actually, it's some question that I left from at the beginning, because we mentioned that the building a digital paper trail. So what that means actually in this context. So what is a digital paper trail?
Yeah. So it's AI facilitated paper trail of your compliance, right? So every disclosure, every file, every validation, every metric reading, right, is attached to a pillar or theme, by virtue of metrics being connected to themes as opposed to metrics being connected to individual frameworks, right? And that all becomes part of a timestamp record, your digital paper trail. As you add evidences, those are time-stamped. Some of them will be periodically updated, etc. Right? So it's a structured history of diligence that grows with your business. And that allows you to prove accountability within the chaos of scattered folders, and without having to do any manual mapping to the evidence.
And when we're talking about evidence, we definitely talking about anything that is a submission or could be an audit, and so mostly audits, and not these audits could be coming from reporting or submissions to the government, uploading information to the platforms like a EPR. So how? Thinking in outcomes, how does this make audits and certifications easier? Because we have the ISO, which is certification, and the audits in terms of compliance.
Well, auditors or assurance providers, you can use each term, interchangeably. They don't have to hunt for proof, basically. You can grant access to an auditor. You can grant them access to a particular element of your compliance profile. It might just be ISO. It might be Cyber Essentials. It might be EPR, right? Or it could be multiple ones. It could be an internal individual. It could be external. They basically are then able to navigate their specific framework that they're interested in, or go directly into the full list of pillars and theme hierarchy, where every disclosure already links to its evidence and validation status. Right. Instead of weeks of preparation, audits become basically a guided walkthrough, faster, cleaner, and verifiable in real time. That massively reduces the headache and the expense of going through an assurance process.
That question, show me whatever, that is not a...
no. You can just tell them, you go and look. Right.
That is highly satisfying, because actually you don't have to think and say, do we have this or not, or asking anybody around and say, well, we're going to answer this one. That's a massive
it's important to note that each framework
Right.
And each pillar and theme is basically going to have a rating on, whether it's complete, whether you have performed all of the relevant, there's the necessary, and then there's the optional and that kind of stuff. But, through the dashboard, you're always going to be aware of where you stand. You're going to know if there's any gaps prior to bringing in someone to perform assurance, right? But once you allow them, to audit your system, right? They'll be able to see only what you want them to see.
Right.
It could just be for an ISO certification, so you're going to be generating a report. It could be for EPR assurance, where they want to actually go in and audit certain information. Usually in the SME space, there's not a lot of auditing and third-party assurance, but as your business grows, that'll start to become more important. And it would be nice to know that it's as easy as generating a report to allow somebody to go in and start, scrolling through evidence.
Right. And obviously, I think that connecting this way will have an added value. So what
Yes.
kind of insights can an organization gain, and once everything is connected this way, like with the pillar themes and traceability and timestamps?
Well, because everything is structured,
Right.
right? And by structured, I mean that there's relationships between all of the data, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked in a previous session related to Trinity about machine learning
Right.
depends on relationships between data, right? That's the
Yeah.
best way to get, to surface some insights that you may not have otherwise captured manually, right? But because everything is structured in that way and is being analyzed by the AI, right? The platform can surface new intelligence, right? So in an ideal world, perhaps a suggestion of a strategy. There's one example of
Yeah.
something that could be suggested by the AI. So which pillars carry the most overlap, where documentation is strongest,
Right.
where attention is needed next,
Right.
prioritization of activities. Basically, it transformed compliance from this administrative chaotic
Yeah.
nightmare into actual genuine management insights.
Right. Well, that's a massive advantage, because then something that looks like a firefighting today, it converts in the other way, which is
Yeah,
strategic. Well, it could be a part of the strategy of the company to understand how they operate, how things are done.
it's
Um,
simple math.
yeah.
It is a fairly simple formula, right?
Right.
When you've got things like compliance, there's the minimum necessary required to operate as a business.
Right.
Okay. And people get drawn towards that approach. I'm just going to do the minimum necessary so I can focus on other activity.
Yeah.
And the problem with that, as opposed to much larger organizations, um, is you never really get a strategic input
Right.
from doing the minimum necessary and from treating it that way. However, you have to have an environment that makes it cost effective to actually embrace all of these frameworks,
Yeah.
right? And if that's not cost effective, then very often the cost of being compliant can outweigh the benefits of being compliant strategically, right?
Right.
This is outside of the absolutely necessary, right? It's
Right.
like ISO standards. There's a bit of a saying when it comes to best practices. Best practices are great if you can afford them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, you just do the best we can practices, right?
Yeah.
Um, but this gives small to medium enterprises and mid-size operators an opportunity to get the benefit of doing things the best possible way and getting
Yeah.
insights into how
Yeah.
to be strategically competitive.
Yeah. Well, that's a massive change from the beginning of the conversation, going through from organize your paper trail and have it in one place, now to go into strategic insights. So what will be next then? How this evolve in the future of on future releases, if you may, because now we're talking about something like take advantage of what you already do.
Mhm. Well, right now, we're moving into predictive territory.
Right.
Right? The AI will soon be able to recognize emerging pillars and themes
Right.
from the market, right? Or that are going to become more applicable to your business. So, for instance, being able to see the EPR 6 months before it got, pushed out there, that kind of a
Yeah.
thing, by tracking the news and giving warnings and that kind of stuff, right? So,
Right.
a lot of suppliers would have benefited from knowing ahead of time that they're going to start receiving scope 1, 2, 3 emissions information from their big customers, right? Because they
Right.
require that from
Yeah.
their supply chain
Yeah.
in order to satisfy their own ESG requirements.
Yeah.
They've got to ask you for it. Now, it's becoming a competitive advantage to be able to respond to those requests
Right.
without it costing you an inordinate amount of resources and time
Yeah.
to deliver those. But being held ransom, that you have to go and manually,
Jeez.
perform all of
Yeah.
this ESG stuff when ESG potentially doesn't apply to your
Yeah.
business, but it applies to your customers. So it does apply to your business,
Right.
right? That's the catch there. Um, but being able to recognize that that's coming or that there's a chance of that, and here's some additional things that you might want to pay attention to, right? Those would be predictive territory kind of stuff, recommendations and strategies, right? So from upcoming ESG standards, new data protection mandates, that kind of stuff. And the AI will suggest where your business should prepare next.
Yeah.
So that means that over time, compliance evolves, in real time. It stays one step ahead of regulatory change and, mandates.
Right.
We can only do the best we can by monitoring the various governments and the environments and stuff like that. But it'd be nice to be ahead of the curve, wouldn't it? And giving that advantage to SMEs and MMEs is unheard of.
And you mentioned a few things actually, but in my mind went directly to an advisory board or to a strategic board, where all these questions are asked and then cascaded down to be investigated. Subcommittees are prepared. I'm talking about large enterprises. But now SME and mid-market have this opportunity with PaperTrail, because actually the system will start to prepare all these questions or predictions before they need to put a team together. So the system itself is going to give this. I think it's brilliant, because it goes almost in the strategic territory. So asking the question, finding information, and showing these gaps, if a way to say, this prediction to the teams. So
I try to imagine certain scenarios.
Right.
Wouldn't it be nice if kind of scenarios, right? So say, for instance, an investor into an MME or something like that reads in the news that a certain mandate is coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
So they get into the next meeting and they're like, geez, what are we doing about X, Y, Z?
Right.
Yeah. Imagine if your response was, well, look at our dashboard.
Yeah.
We've been on this for the last 6 months. We're ready. What a hell of a response that is, to make stakeholders confident that you really know what you're doing, and to be as prepared ahead of time as is possible. Well, of course, we can't guess what's coming up the pipeline, but we can certainly, predict very closely based on the news and that kind of stuff, right?
Well, amazing. Well, I think that we can wrap up today, because we are going into a rabbit hole. But I think that every framework begins as a rule book, but together they form a story or a record of diligence and integrity, right? So PaperTrail brings that story together under one structure, under one language, and one source of truth. And this is mentioned very frequently, but here we have proof that how it's done, which is sometimes this famous phrase, source of the one single source of truth, is very difficult to prove, but here we just prove it, how is done. So from framework to evidence, from duplication to design, and that's the power of your digital PaperTrail. So this is an invitation. If you haven't joined our early adopter program, visit papertrail.com and start building yours today, and take advantages of the offerings that we have there with the early adopters, right? Okay, Richard, thank you very much again, and we'll catch up next week with more insights about how PaperTrail can help companies in the mid-market.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Fantastic. Thank you. Bye-bye.